what's up for the next 4 weeks?
Yeah, so for me, I have the next 2 weeks at home in Trondheim, and then I'm heading off to Altitude for a 3-week camp in Italy. So for me, the plan is big volume this week, and then dropping down the volume next week and increasing the intensity before I go to Altitude. Because the first block at Altitude, or the first week, 10 days at Altitude, always ends up being a little bit easier training, less intensity while you're acclimatizing. So yeah, volume this week, intensity next week, and then building up both volume and intensity the first couple of weeks at Altitude gradually. It's basically the plan for what I'm going to be doing. Now, I'm guessing you guys probably aren't going on a 3-week Altitude camp. So if I was just going to be at home training, what I would do is sort of similar to what I say every 4-week block. I would do a sort of standard block periodization, 3 weeks, more focus on keeping the total training volume fairly high. So for me, it would be like 25 hours plus minus with 2 or 3 interval sessions. And then I would have 1 week where I'd drop the hours down to about 15 hours, but I would push the number of intensity sessions up to 4, maybe even 5. And last block, what I talked about was trying to keep 2 or most of the intensity sessions, the sort of progressive long sessions like I've talked about, where you start off below threshold and then increase to above threshold, and you have like 45 minutes to an hour, and then you get a really good solid volume of intensity. I also talked about maybe trying to put in 1 session a week where you cut down the volume a little bit and you try and push a little bit harder. And so now we're getting on into the autumn. I think that's important to slightly have a little bit more focus on higher end speed as you get closer to the winter and the ski season. So I still feel like at this point in time, it's a long time until the Berkey and things like that. So you don't want to just completely drop off the volume yet. Still want to keep the total training volume high, keep in some good long distance sessions, things like that. 1 long double pole session a week, like I've talked about. But maybe now try and have 50% of the intervals you do, keep them the long sort of progressive intervals, and then have a couple of intervals where you decrease the length of the interval, maybe have slightly longer breaks and increase the intensity. So a standard sort of session for that would be a sort of 6 times 6 minutes with 2 minutes break. Something like that. Can be roller skiing, running, whatever. And then you try and start off just sort of below race pace, but then you push last 1 or 2 a little bit above what a 15K race pace would be. And so you can do variations of that. You've got 4 weeks of training now, but that sort of like half hour-ish work is really good. And one thing I also like to stick in a little bit now is in one of the longer sessions that I talked about, where I do the sort of progressive high volume intervals. I like to mix that up a little bit, and I do a session where I do 10 minutes times 2, 3 minutes times 2, 1 minute times 2, and then I repeat the whole thing again. So the idea is going sort of just below threshold on the 10-minute ones, and then on the 3-minute and 1-minute ones, you go as hard as you can, basically. And then I really like doing this session double poling, because it absolutely wrecks your arms when you do the sprint, the 3-minute, 1-minute ones, and then you've got to go back to that sort of controlled pace. And it's really good for simulating how you go in like long mass start races. So it could be, for example, if you're doing the Berkey, something like that, where you go off keeping up all right, and then suddenly you get to some sort of hilly terrain, or people start pushing the pace, and you've got to go over speed to try and keep up. And then usually, hopefully, if you manage to keep up for a few a few kilometers, the pace will ease back down again, and that's what I like to simulate by going back to these 10-minute threshold speeds, and then finishing off with 3-3-1-1 again at the end to simulate how you go at the end of a mass start race, where you just have to go pretty nuts at the end and go as fast as you can. So yeah, that's the sort of stuff I'm going to be looking at for the next 4 weeks, or would be if I was not going to altitude.
Okay, well, before I jump in my questions, Andrew, you mentioned you have quite a bit of cold rain now in Norway and the temperatures drop down. So do you do anything different in your training when it gets wet and kind of not very pleasant outside?
No, I've grown up in Scotland, so I like the rain.
Okay, so you're looking forward to it.
Nah, so it like if it's just rain, then I like going out in the rain. It doesn't bother me. When I do have to start changing stuff is later on in the autumn, when it starts getting a little bit icy, because then you've got to be able to adapt, because roller skiing isn't exactly the easiest thing to do if it's 0 degrees and it's been freezing overnight and then it starts sleeting and stuff. Then you've got to be a little bit able to adapt, but not so. I don't change it too much. Just got to, as long as you've got a washing machine that works, you're all good.
Yeah. All right, let's jump into 2 questions. So do you V1, in skating on each side, right and left when you're racing? And if not, do you train on both sides?
I do both. So, sorry, my phone is ringing here. I do both. So I both train on both sides and I race on both sides. However, I do it in distance races, but if I was doing a sprint race, I'm not so good at my right side. But for me, if I'm doing a longer distance race, then I feel like if I just continually use one side, then I feel like the way I ski technically, I build up so much lactate in the one quad that it's nice to swap. But I think it's a little bit of a personal preference. I know a lot of skiers that basically just have one strong side and then mostly just train on that. So it's not the end of the world if you just train on one side, but if you do have the ability to change, then I think it can be an advantage, especially if you're doing like marathon races where you get long sections where they're off camber. Then it's really, really good to be able to lead to the side that's the uphill side. So it can be an advantage to train both sides. But at the same time, if you think if one side is way stronger and it's going to take a lot of work to get the other side strong, then sometimes it's better just focusing on getting your good side really good.
And when do you notice one side is more natural for you than the other? Do you have that feeling, or now in the distance race they kind of both feel the same?
At distance speed, they both feel pretty similar. But like definitely, if I'm going all out sprint, then my left side is stronger. I've just got a little bit less coordination on the right side.
Okay, excellent. Okay, next question. Do you kick double pole on roller skis? And if not, do you work on kick double pole in some other ways?
I don't do so much generally, but I don't do so much kick double pole when I'm racing, because I feel like one of my strong points is double poling. So I tend to push double poling until a point where it's natural to go straight over to diagonal. So maybe I'll do 1 or 2 kick double poles as a transition from double poling into diagonal, but I don't focus so much on kick double pole. The only time where I would do a decent amount of kick double pole is if we're doing long uphill classic interval sessions in the summer. So I was just on a training camp last week, and then we were doing a lot of long hill climbs, and then on road you get this sort of really weird gradient where it's not steep enough for diagonal to be natural, but then it's a little bit slower to go double pole. So then I will do a little bit more kick double pole on interval sessions like that. But in general, I don't have a massive focus on it. So I don't have any particularly exciting drills either, unfortunately, to get better at it. I feel like it's like a really like diagonal, when you do it on roller skis, it's easy to think about skiing technically and the way you should on skis. But I find like kick double pole, it's really easy to just use the ratchet wheel on the roller skis in a way that you wouldn't on skis. And I just find it's a difficult technique to master on roller skis.
Okay, all right, thanks. And then, okay, well, next question I have. Do you ever incorporate fasted training sessions into your workout, either with your longer over distance sessions or shorter interval sessions? And maybe you can, Andrew, mention what's fasted training. I don't know if you.
Yeah, so fasted training is basically when you just don't consume calories before you do your session. So it would be a morning session, and you just wouldn't eat before you go out. So, and I've done quite a lot of it, but I've definitely changed the way I do it compared to how I used to. I used to do long sessions. I wouldn't consume any calories before or during the session. I would just drink water, and I would do like 4 or 5 hour sessions. And then you get the point of it is you get better at fat burning, so you can go at a higher rate during long races where you're burning fat and hopefully save your glycogen stores until later on in the races. But we've got a really good nutritionist I work with on the team, and he says that to get that effect, you don't need to do these massive long sessions like I was doing. If you just do like 90 minutes as part of a long session, then you're going to get the same effect. So what I tend to do now is I will eat before the session, but I'll just have like a 2-egg omelet or something like that. So then you fill your stomach a little bit, and it feels a little bit or mentally it's a little bit easier. You've still not got any carbs, you've only got proteins. And then after I hit 90 minutes to 2 hours, I'll start consuming calories because it just shortens the recovery time massively, and you're still getting the same effect as you would on a longer session. And then I feel like the next session I do, whether it's the afternoon after or the next day, then the quality is just so much better, because if I was pushing 4 or 5 hours without eating, I would just be absolutely wrecked afterwards. And I never do intervals fasted, because I feel like the point of intervals is to get high heart rate, work at higher speed, go technical. And if you're going fasted, your heart rate is massively depressed, and also the speed you go at is just going to be lower because you've not got the carbs to burn to work at that high rate. So I think it's kind of counterproductive. So if I was going to do it, then I would definitely do it on a longer, easier session. Question on the chat.
Yeah.
Altitude camp I'm going to is in Livigno in Italy. It's about 1,800 meters. Going to be there for just over 3 weeks. So it's a nice place. It's super nice for running. I've been there a lot. It's not the best for some people think it's good for roller skiing. I've been there so many times. I'm a little bit bored of the loops, and it's but it's very nice for training. So definitely can't complain.